high school graduate. She is an alum of DHS herself and a longtime volunteer with Angles, and she's going to be introducing the program and Jessica. Thank you.
I'm short. Thank you all for coming to this very, very important evening. I am an alum of Deerfield, and I'm also an alum of Deerfield Parent Network. I worked with them for years, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank them for this evening, for getting us into Deerfield High School, to helping support this amazing program, and hopefully more programs in the future. Some of you may remember me from PTOs and from all kinds of stuff around town, but some of you young people may remember me from middle school. I was the Lynx lady. I would come in with my big bag and we'd talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, a year ago, we changed our name to Angles. We rebranded, but whatever the name, it doesn't matter. It's what we do. And what we do is we help young people. We believe in prevention through education. What does that mean? That means we're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to say, this is the best way to keep yourself healthy and safe. And as the parent of 3 kids, all proud graduates of Deerfield High School, all I wanted for my kids is that they were healthy and safe. And I wanted their friends healthy and safe. And so on and so on. So I have been with Lynx Angles for 15 years, talking about this very important stuff of life. So, for those of you that remember me from middle school, we used to always say Lynx Angles is located in Northfield. What does that mean? That means that we are located just down the block from that tapas restaurant that you all went to for your extra credit Spanish points. Okay? So now you know where we are. We provide confidential health care services. We deal with your sexual health. We also have a pride program that helps young people who are gay, lesbian, questioning. And then we also have community ed, health educators who go to schools all over the place and talk about really fascinating topics. So, look for us. We have pens on the way out, our phone number, our website. Let us be a part of your life. Tonight's topic is a tough one, but a very, very important one. So I applaud you all for coming. I hope you learned something. And I know that this can be tough. So if you feel like you need to get up and leave, go ahead. But do come back. If it's too much for you, we understand. Don't sit here and suffer, okay? It's really important that you feel a part of this discussion. So I don't want you to just sit there. I want you to ask questions. I want you to be active in what we're doing, because it may, unfortunately, affect you. At the end, we're going to ask that kids be the first to come up to the mics to ask questions. We are videotaping this program, and we will turn the videotape off at that point, so no one needs to worry about a question. We also ask that parents use the little white cards to ask your questions. We really want to talk with the kids first, okay? But all questions welcome, and no question is stupid. Again, I'd like to thank Parent Network for bringing us here tonight. It's a wonderful collaboration. And now I would like to introduce Jessica, who is the star of our show, someone very special to me, and by the end of the evening will be very special to you. She's courageous and wonderful, and I hope that you learn from her. Jessie.
Hi guys, as Joanne said, my name is Jessica Harris. I'm 23 years old. I currently live in Milwaukee, where I work at the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. I work in foster care system through them. It wasn't too long ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, that I was like you students here. I graduated Deerfield High School in the class of 2010. I was a pretty average high schooler, I'd say. I went to all the sporting events, the football games, the basketball games. I was on the dance company right up here, which I absolutely loved. Things were pretty typical. And then about 5 months after I graduated from Deerfield, I was sexually assaulted by 4 men who I knew. I was away at college, and I was raped by my peers. What happened to me was wrong, but it's not uncommon. And that's why we're here tonight, so we can shatter the silence of acquaintance rape. So to begin, we just kind of want to talk about what sexual assault is. There's a lot of myths and misconceptions surrounding the topic, and we just want to make sure we all have the same definition. So as you see up there, sexual assault is any sexual contact or behavior that occurs without the explicit consent of the recipient. That explicit consent component is the most crucial part of what defines sexual assault and what makes it an assault, what makes it a crime. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Sexual assault is when one person overpowers somebody. This is not a crime of passion, as it's so commonly discussed. It has nothing to do with love or overwhelming sexual desire. It is about power, it's about authority, it's about exerting that over somebody else. With that being said, sexual assault is never the fault of the victim. I did not ask to be raped. Nobody asked to be raped. No one asked to be abused of any kind, in any way, ever. But unfortunately, we live in a society where we blame victims for their abusers' inexcusable behavior. You will see this concept of it not being the victim's fault a lot throughout the presentation because it is so important to us. So who is sexually assaulted? Anyone can be sexually assaulted. It doesn't matter if you're on a college campus, in a high school, if you're out in the real world, if you're gay, straight, African American, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. Sexual assault does not discriminate against its victims, and that is why we need to talk about it. And that is why it is so incredible that each and every one of you are here tonight. Like I said, I was a normal Deerfield student like you guys. I never thought this would happen to me. I'm from the village of Bannockburn with 1,500 people. This never crossed my mind, and it still happened. The average age of student victims and their rapists is 18.5 years old. That's essentially still a child, right?
Why do you think that 18.5 is the age where this happens? Any thoughts?
Everyone's in school, they're not supervised, things get out of control.
Yeah, it's that first, you hear me? It's that first semester of college. You're on your own. You're free. Mom doesn't know if you're coming home after curfew because you have no curfew. You are new to a place where you met people who become your instant friends. So 18 and a half is that very powerful age, that moment where you are in control of your own life.
And I think it's such a defining time period in anyone's life, which is why it can be so traumatizing. 1 in 6 women will be a victim of completed or attempted rape. That number increases to 1 in 5 college women, and 1 in 10 rape victims is male. So it definitely happens to male. Not trying to discredit that and say it doesn't.
But it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sadly, no one is immune.
So I mentioned before that I was assaulted by my peers, but I should have been more specific. These guys were my friends. I had classes with them. I hung out with them outside of class. I never saw this coming because they were people I trusted and people that I respected. Rape is not being committed by the stranger in the bushes or that scary guy hiding in the alleyway. That definitely happens, but 85% of all rape victims know their rapists. How terrifying is that? That these people who build your trust then attack you in such a vulnerable way. 75% of rapists and 50% of rape victims have been drinking before an assault.
The excessive use of alcohol is the greatest risk factor for being a victim and an assaulter. Okay? We're not going to talk about whether you drink in high school, but people do drink in college, and they drink in excess. And it is the number one reason why rapes on college campuses are increasing.
And most victims blame themselves. Even though I knew what happened was beyond my control from the moment it was happening, there have definitely still been moments where I think to myself, maybe I could have done something differently. But that's because of the voices I hear from society and the way that I am blamed and shamed for telling my story. So it's important to note that victims blame themselves just as much.
And they should.
And they absolutely should not.
How often does acquaintance rape happen? Each year, there are 237,868 victims of sexual assault. Reporting an assault is not easy. Most assaults are not even reported, so that number is probably horribly low. Most people don't report. And then there's the false report. People say, well, girls just make this up because they don't want people to think that they're sleazy. They try to, make up a story so that people don't think that they're guilty. False reports account for only 2% of all reports. And that's no higher than any other felony that's out there. So it's real and it's happening. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. 80% of college campus sexual assaults are never even reported. So I'm not good at math, but if 80% aren't reported, and we have that huge number being reported, you can see what a horrible, horrible problem we have.
So let's talk a little bit about consent. The legal definition of legal consent means you've got to be sober. Consent has to be given voluntarily, and it needs to be clearly communicated. I'm sure you guys have heard the phrase, no means no. Well, thanks to the state of California, we're kind of changing that a bit and saying yes means yes, which is saying that consent needs to be affirmative. If you don't protest, that still doesn't mean that you should be raped. That's still rape. If you stay silent because you're traumatized and your body's frozen, that's still rape. Being in a relationship does not authorize any kind of sexual behavior. Even if you're married, it does not give you the right to overpower someone in that way. Consent is an active agreement and it protects both partners. So both men and women should be making sure that when they're getting involved in these sexual relationships, that it is consensual. We so often give mixed signals. So ask for clarification. Don't be afraid of that. And consent can be taken back at absolutely any time.
And you cannot give consent if you are drunk or using drugs. And that is the law in Illinois, that consent must be given. And if you're messed up, you cannot give consent. And if you are messed up because you drank too much or you took some pill, it still doesn't mean that anyone has the right to rape you. And if you are in a situation and you don't say no, being submissive doesn't mean you're saying yes. It just means that you weren't able to say no, and it still makes it wrong. The dynamics of acquaintance rape. Sometimes the person says no, but they really mean yes. They're just being coy. They're just flirting. They're just being a tease. Not true. You need to communicate with your partner. If you are unable to communicate, that means they are not giving consent. That means no. Alcohol and drugs causes vulnerability on both sides, not just for the victim and not just for the rapist. Okay? It causes a problem for everybody because a victim can't be sharp enough to realize that maybe the situation doesn't seem right. If you're messed up, You can't be as aware as you need to be. If you are the aggressor and you're drunk, it can make you more aggressive. It can also make you ignore when the person says no. Because you're drunk and you're having fun and you feel like you're in control, and it makes it easier, again, to ignore the no. So, tell me, boys, girls, what are the differences between the sexes? Besides the obvious anatomical ones, what are the differences between the sexes? What do we know about boys?
They are perceived to be more aggressive and tough.
Mm-hmm. Right. And girls are supposed to be passive, submissive. People, boys and girls, they often drink because it makes them less inhibited. When you're new in college and you don't really know anybody, you have a couple drinks that loosens you up. You feel like, hey, I can do this. I can be, one of those people having fun at a party. And then you're drinking, and then there's that peer pressure. People often think that peer pressure is going to say to you, you have to drink. What peer pressure does is it comes from yourself. And it says, I need to fit in. No one's going to force anything on you. Well, they might, but usually you do it yourself because you want to fit in. That peer pressure is coming from within. But the bottom line and the differences between men and women, men are bigger. They're stronger. If they want to hurt a girl, they have more physical power to do so.
So now you guys are going to watch a little video about what happened to me and hear my story. October 30th, 2010 started off as an exceptionally great day for me. I spent the morning with my high school boyfriend and we had just decided to get back together, so I was thrilled. My afternoon I spent relaxing with my friends and talking to my mom on the phone. It was a perfect Saturday. Later in the afternoon I began to text Dan. Dan was an older basketball player who was friends with Darnell and Victor, two of my classmates and two of Dan's teammates. Dan wanted my girlfriends and I to go over that evening. He was having a couple of people over and said it would be fun if we joined. Now, the basketball players don't have the best reputation on campus. They're known to sleep around with a bunch of different girls. However, I was the kind of girl who gave everyone the benefit of the doubt, and I really thought they were my friends. Because of their reputation, my friends and I debated whether we should go to the party or not. We decided that since there were 5 of us, we had power in numbers. I got to the party around 10:15, only it definitely wasn't a party. We were all surprised to see that there were only 7 people there, 6 basketball players and 1 high school recruit. Right off the bat, Dan tried to get us all to take a shot. Now, even though we weren't 21, we did have a few drinks that night. Throughout the course of 5 hours, I had 6 half shots, so only 3 shots in total. Dan kept telling me that he wanted to talk to me in private. But I didn't want to leave my friends since I didn't know anyone there. I finally caved though and followed him to one of the back bedrooms. As soon as I walked in, Dan closed the door and threw me on the bed. It was pretty clear he wanted to do more than talk, so I got up to leave. Dan stood in the doorway with his arms and legs outstretched, completely blocking my exit. I tried to sneak through the space between his right arm and leg, but he pushed me to the ground. At the same time, he was pulling his shorts down. He grabbed my head and held it in place while he thrusted himself in and out of my mouth. Sometimes when you go through trauma, there will be certain recollections that just stick out much more than the rest. Perhaps my most vivid memory from that night, that is totally ingrained in my brain, is the image of his forearms restraining me as he was assaulting me. He has a tattoo on each forearm. One spells out his mother's name and one spells out his sister's name. And all I kept thinking was I couldn't believe he was doing this to me with those arms that were tattooed for the meaningful women in his life. Dan let me out of the room once he was finished, and he left the apartment completely. It's pretty well known that in a traumatic situation, people often fight or flight, but there's a third option that's less talked about, which is freeze. And that's exactly what I did. My brain and body just completely shut down, and I was so vulnerable. The last thing I remembered before things got too hazy was being led to the other bedroom by Darnell, Victor, and James. James was the last one in the room, with one of my girlfriends trailing behind him. He closed the door in her face and locked it behind him. All I can remember is the feeling of being passed and moved around from person to person, as well as a few vulgar phrases that were said. Meanwhile, my friend was trying to get someone to unlock the door. Finally, someone gave her a key to the bedroom. When my friend found me, I was slumped down in a chair with my pants undone and Darnell standing on top over me. I didn't realize that something had happened to me until an hour or two after I left. I was walking to another party with my friends when it literally clicked. I pulled back my friend who had walked in on me and just completely broke down. She ended up calling our friend Bill for some extra support. After I told Bill what had happened, he said I had two options. He would call campus security, or he would call my older sister, who also went to the same school. The last thing I wanted to do was upset my sister, so I decided with campus security. I told campus security everything I could remember. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make an official report yet, but they assured me that they were just taking down the information so that if I did choose to report it later, it would be available. They promised me over and over again that what I was saying would not leave them. They also told me I could go to the police, but there would be a great deal of media attention. One of the officers told me to think about how my social life would be affected by reporting the assault to the police, especially because basketball is such a big deal at my school. The next morning, Dan had texted me asking if I had gone to campus security. I was completely thrown off guard because, as the officers had promised, no one was going to find out unless I decided to make a report. Then I had Victor calling me and yelling at me, and it was quite clear that campus security had talked to the basketball players. What ultimately made me decide to report the assault to campus security and later to the police was the thought of one more girl having to go through what I went through. I thought to myself, if I helped one person and inspired one person, that it wouldn't have all been for nothing. 3 days after the first news report came out about my story, another girl from my university reported that she had been sexually assaulted by other basketball players as well. That helped me to know that I did the right thing. After I filed the official report with campus security, there were 2 hearings, both of which I was persuaded to not attend. I was told that it would be too hard for me to handle. Nothing resulted from either of those hearings. I believe the men had to write a paper on what they did to me and why it was wrong. Because of that, I decided I needed to tell the police. After I reported to the police, the media did find out, and it was all over the news and newspapers in the town of which I went to school. From this, there was a lot of negative feedback from my peers. People are really quick to assume that I was drunk, and then when they hear that I was drinking, it's all of a sudden that I was drunk and was asking for it and that I wanted it. People also assume that I was dressed inappropriately and provocatively, and the fact of the matter is it was Halloween weekend, so people assume I decided to have a slutty Halloween costume. That's not even the truth. I was in jeans and a long sleeve shirt and boots. It was nothing sexy about it, and it still happened to me. I also get a lot of, you should have known better, and what were you doing there in the first place? Which is so unfair because, as I said, they were my friends, and I really trusted them and just thought we were going to have a fun night. It took me a really long time to know that it wasn't my fault, and initially, the first night, I knew I hadn't asked for it. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but it's hard to not let those other voices get inside your head and convince you that maybe if you had done something differently, this wouldn't have happened to you. Despite all the negative feedback I got, I also received a lot of positive responses, and there is always someone out there who's going to support you and be on your side. You just have to be willing to talk to them. As I've said, I was an extremely trusting person, and from that night on, it has been extremely difficult for me to trust anyone especially men. I don't feel comfortable when I am outnumbered by men. I don't feel comfortable in a large group of people, but I also don't feel comfortable one-on-one. And that's something that still lasts to this day, 4 years later. These men took my innocence. I was 18 years old, 6 weeks into my freshman year of college, and had so much going for me. I had so much to look forward to, and they completely stomped on it. I hope that my story can encourage someone who has been through what I went through to say something, or to make the report, or just to stop blaming themselves. I know from my experience it's so easy to get caught up in what others are saying, and I think it's important for everyone to know that it's not your fault, and when you've been betrayed and violated in such a horrible way, you have no control over it. People often ask me what I would do differently, knowing what I know now and going through what I went through. And to be honest, there isn't one thing I would do differently. I was going to my friend's house. Maybe I was naive, but I was 18 years old. I did nothing wrong, and nothing I did that night could have prevented it from happening. Okay. So, as Joanne said, we'll have a question and answer section at the end. If you guys have any questions, you are more than welcome to ask me anything. I kind of touched on the effects I felt being a victim of acquaintance rape. I'm sure you guys can assume victims feel depression, anxiety, things like that, but it is so much more than that. Fear is a huge, huge effect. Last night when I was reviewing the PowerPoint, I was trying to make a list to myself of all of the things that being a victim has made me fearful of. And as I was writing them down, I realized this is ridiculous. I'll be talking about it all night. Whether it's from little things like fear of being accepted, fear of being believed. It really affects every aspect of your life. Substance abuse is another huge effect victims go through. A lot of times they self-medicate to cope with these other effects they experience. Difficulty in relationships. I kind of touched on that in the video, but that has by far been the hardest thing for me. Not just my relationships with men, but my relationships with friends as well. As you can imagine, being assaulted by your friends, it just totally changes how you perceive people and how you welcome them into your life. So I would say I'm definitely more closed off than I have been previously. The effects of being raped have really ruined a lot of relationships for me. Some guys don't want anything to do with me because of what I went through. They judge me for it. Some people just don't understand that I can't trust them, that I can't open up to them. But I also have this need to be fiercely independent and gain that control back. Focusing is incredibly hard when you're a victim, especially if we're talking about on a college campus or on a high school campus, when you still have to walk down the streets, walk down the halls, and see these people who did this to you. I skipped so many classes throughout my entire 4 years just because I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't walk down the street. It was scary. That's that fear again. The fear of seeing them over and over again, and that re-victimization. I also really isolated myself and alienated myself. I isolated myself from a lot of my high school friends when that happened. It was my first semester freshman year. My friends were rushing. They were enjoying this exciting college experience, and I didn't want to stomp on that with my horrible, terrible story. So I distanced myself and lost a lot of good friends. But as I said, I still alienate myself from people. And I think, unfortunately, I'm missing out on a lot because I can't open myself up like that anymore. And then, unfortunately, suicidal thoughts and attempts are another big effect victims feel. So how can you help a friend who has been sexually assaulted? I know I did not have very supportive friends at the time. My friends decided that they did not want to be associated with me anymore because they didn't want to be a part of that stigma that comes along with being an acquaintance rape victim. So I know a lot about what not to do if your friend is assaulted. But the most important thing to do is to listen to them and to believe them. I get that when someone tells you the details of their assault, that it can be so hard to believe it because it's an unbelievable crime. But that doesn't mean it's not our truth and it's not our reality. This is still happening. Encourage your friends to go to the hospital and report to the police. Obviously, medical attention is incredibly important, and reporting to the police, there's so many reasons for that. To prevent it from happening to somebody else, for your own self. And these two things can be really, really hard though, and really traumatic. I definitely felt re-victimized going to the police and going to my campus security and making those reports. So it's important to make sure that they're doing it on their own time. There is a statute of limitations. I believe it is 3 years, correct? 3 years for sexual assault in Illinois. So I don't want you to push your friends to report. It's definitely important and something that needs to be done. Respect how much your friends want to tell you. This is a very personal experience, and as a victim, you feel totally violated because someone has controlled you and taken over your body. So if they don't want to talk about it, respect that. Be patient. Acknowledge their strength. Understand. Listen. Ask them how you can help. Everybody responds differently. All those effects I talked about, any victim can feel any wide range of those. Okay, so it's important to literally ask the victim, say, what do you need from me? What can I do?
And it could be something as simple as walking them to class.
Yes.
So that they're not alone when they encounter their rapist. It could be something like making sure they have someone to eat lunch with. Make sure that they're eating. Make sure that they're showering. Just make sure that they're going through the day knowing that someone is by their side.
Those daily little living tasks that you don't even think about can become so hard when you're a victim and victim by your friends and your peers. And most importantly, remember it's not their fault. No matter what your friend was wearing, no matter if she was completely wasted, she did not ask, she or he did not ask to be raped. No one does, and nobody deserves this.
Never blame the survivor, ever.
So how can you prevent yourself and protect your children? Trust your gut. We have these wonderful instincts for a reason. It's important to use them. If you feel something's fishy, get out of there. Be aware of date rape, drugs, and excessive drinking. As Joanne mentioned, drinking makes you more vulnerable. Both parties,
We talk about this in middle school. We say when you're at a party, when you're at a bar mitzvah, never accept a drink from anybody else. Always know who poured it. Always open that water bottle yourself. You have to do that in college. These parties with the kegs and the big bowls of concoctions, stay away from that stuff, okay? You can open your own beer. You can pour your own drink. Don't accept it, especially from someone you don't know. I mean, there are people that just do this. This is their mission, to harm young women. So go back to that 7th grade mentality of never accepting a drink, never putting down a drink and picking it up again.
Know you have the right to set limits and you can withdraw your consent at any point. That's why it's so important that you students are here to learn about this. A lot of people don't know what consent is, what sexual assault is. So it's important to know these things and know what you have control over, which is your body. Don't assume others can read your mind. Use your voice. And listen carefully. If you think you're getting mixed signals, ask for clarification. This goes for both men and women. This can protect both parties. It's that active agreement of consent. And what I think is most important is get involved if you think you see someone is at risk. Don't be that person who just walks by and then reads in the newspaper the next day, oh, so-and-so did this to this person, and you saw that all happening. Be the active bystander. You can stop this. You can change somebody's life and prevent them from going through what I had to go through.
Watch out for your friends. You know who your friends are. You know who that person is who's going to have your back. You know that person who is the one you can rely on. Always have that person with you. Go out in groups. Go out with people that care about you. Make sure that you are watching out for each other. What can men do? There's a bunch of men here tonight. What can men do? Well, you need to think about your power as the man. Think about how you were raised. Think about the important women in your life. And what if this happened to them? Think about your attitude toward women. Do you respect them? We need to respect each other. You need to know that no means no. You need to understand that there are consequences. There are laws. The world, thankfully, is changing. They are attacking this issue with a vengeance. You've got to learn that you can't make assumptions. Just because somebody's dressed in a certain way, or drinking, or flirting, or whatever it is, you can't assume that that means they want you to have sex with them. Body language can be deceiving. Be aware of the legal, social, and emotional consequences. Make certain that you have active, sober consent. One sexual act can change your life forever. It can change your victim's life forever and your life forever. Think about it. I know this sounds really crass, but think with the big head. Not the little head. It's so important. It's the rest of your life, guys and girls. Treat others with care and respect. Your mom may be sitting right next to you right now. What if your mom was at that party? Think of your behavior. Think of your grandma watching you. How will you behave? Don't you want them to be proud of your behavior? Don't you want to be proud of yourself? Be a trusted friend and protector. Like Jesse said, if you see something going on, don't walk away. Be the man and walk in and step in and make sure that that girl is okay. Take that extra time to care for other people. Use your voice to help others. Don't look the other way. It's not funny. It's not a fraternity prank that's going to get you to the top of the fraternity ladder. It's a person. Be a part of the solution by standing up. Be the good guy. Be the strong guy. Be the guy that your mom and your grandma and your sister hope that you'll be.
So here are some resources for you guys to utilize. Local police departments are always a great option. There's also student counseling and health centers. My school, since I came about, when I was assaulted, they didn't have any kind of sexual assault, anything. And since then, they have created an entire position surrounding dealing with sexual assault victims and being that person and that provider. And I think a lot of schools are really doing that because they're under the microscope. So there are really great resources at high schools, at colleges now. Utilize them, ask about them. A lot of colleges have programs you have to attend before your first day of freshman year about sexual assault. Go to that, learn more, get as much information as you possibly can. Also, there's the Northwest Casa in Evanston, the Zachariah Center in Gurnee, Angles in Northfield, and there's this new documentary that's out called The Hunting Ground, that's about sexual assault on college campuses.
Yeah, look it up online. There are local dates where it's being shown, like Evanston, Northbrook, I believe.
Is that like Loyola, something
Yeah,
like that?
take a look. It's a very, very powerful. I've just seen the trailer and it's quite amazing.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
To get in the way before it happens.
To get a friend home safe.
And to not blame the victim.
It's on us.
To look out for each other.
To not look the other way. It's on us to stand up.
To step in.
To take responsibility.
It's on us, all of us,
To stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Okay, let's take a collective breath. Okay. If anyone has any questions,